Hi everyone, it's Laura here and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video I'm going to show you how to create a Halloween card using stamps by CC Designs. The stamps I am using today are from the CC Designs Monster Mash stamp set. These are foam mounted rubber stamps, so in order to stamp them with my Misty, I removed the foam insert of the Misty itself. And for my stamping, I decided to use the My Favorite Things Black Licorice Hybrid ink because I want to be doing some coloring with my Spectrum Noir markers. And because I'm using my Misty, I am able to repeatedly stamp my images until I get a nice and dark outline. And then I can go ahead and start coloring. As I said, I will be using my Spectrum Noir markers to color in my images, and as you can see, I already went ahead and colored two of them. I didn't want this video to be too long, so I decided to share the coloring just for this cute little witch. I apologize that the part where I was coloring her face did not get recorded, but for that I used TN3, FS9, FS4 and FS2. For the inside of her mouth I used DR7 and DR6, and for her tongue I used MG4. I shaded everything as if the light is coming from the top right corner, and then I moved on to color her hat. I used some cool grays and I wanted her hat and her clothes to be pretty dark, so I started off with my EG10 marker, which is pretty dark, and then I moved on and blended that towards the highlight using my EG7. For my highlight color, I picked the EG5 marker, but I realized that my highlights were not as light as I wanted it to be. So what I did is I first colored all the areas that were missing with the IG5 marker, and then I will take a lighter marker, the IG3 marker, and I will use it to sort of bleach the colors that I have put down already. So I'm going to use that IG3 to color in my highlight areas and lighten them up a little bit. For the little strip on her hat and on her shoes, I decided to use some purples. I started with my PL5 marker and I put it down where I thought the shadows would fall. And then I blended that out with my PL4, PL3 and finally with the PL2 marker, that would be my highlight color. For the heart on her hat, I used BP1, BP3 and BP6. And this time I started with my lighter marker because these BP colors are a little bit harder to blend with each other, so I thought that by saturating the paper with my highlight tone, I would have an easier time blending the colors and I could achieve a nicer contrast. For the broomstick I used some browns, so I started again with my highlight marker, which is the EB3. I coated the entire area and then with my EB5 first and then with my EB7 I created my shadows. For the bristles on the broomstick I used the gold browns, so the GB family, and in order to create some texture I am doing some flicking motions with my wrist. I first added some GB10, then I came in with my GB7, and because I felt that the shadows were not as dark as I wanted them to be, I picked the GB11 in order to deepen the contrast. I blended that out with the GB10, and then I went over that little band with my TN markers. I started with the TN9, then I blended that out with the TN6, and finally I came in with the TN4. I wanted her hair to be pretty light, so I am using my EB1 and EB2 markers to create some texture, again doing those flicking motions and focusing the flicks in the areas where I think there would be most shadows. And I usually start adding the flicks with my lighter marker so that if there is something that's not exactly right, I have some room to fix it. Because hair can be a little bit tricky, so I like to play it safe. Once I was done coloring my images, I fussy cut them with my EK Success Cutter B scissors. I am first trimming off any excess paper that might get in the way, and then, in order to get a precise cut, I am holding my scissors as straight as I can with my right hand, and I am moving the paper with my left hand. I am going slowly and trying to be as precise as I can, and these scissors make the job really easy in that respect because they are very sharp and also they have a fine point that allows you to go into all the nooks and crannies of your images. Next up, I started working on this watercolor background, and I have a sheet of watercolor cardstock. This is by Winsor & Newton and it is the Cotman series. And I started by adding some water to the background, and I'm now dropping in some color. I picked some blues, purples and the black from the Gansai Tambi 36 pan watercolor set. I am doing some quick and messy watercoloring because I want to get a spooky sky, and really I am not doing any particular technique of any sort. I am just dropping color here and there in order to get some variation and some texture on my background. Once I am satisfied with the amount of color that I put down, I'm going to speed up the drying process with my heat gun, and then I will come in with a second layer of color. And for that I used the black color only, and as you can see I am not adding it to the entire background but just in spots so that I have some of that blue and purple peeking through. I am coming in with a little bit more colors where I felt that I had darkened up the sky a little bit too much, and then I'm going to dry my background with my heat gun again. For my card base, I did a little bit of die cutting off camera. I used this circle die by Tonic Studios to cut my background and an opening in my front panel. For the front panel and for the spooky fence, I used this stitched rectangle die by Lone Fawn. And for the spooky fence, I also used this other die here by Lone Fawn. And I know that out of that big background I used only a small circle, but I thought this worked best for my design and I can always use the rest of that panel on another card. In order to spice up my spooky fence, I decided to do some heat embossing. So as a first step, I am coating the entire area of my die cut with Versamark ink, simply by tapping the pad on top of the die cut. This way it's all coated with that clear sticky ink, and once I coat the die cut with my embossing powder, it will stick to the entire surface. The embossing powder that I'm using is the Shimmering Pearl embossing powder by Nuvo, and this one has some nice glitter to it. And then I can melt the embossing powder with my heat gun. I also wanted to embellish the card front a little bit more, so I die cut some white cardstock using the CC Designs Halloween dies, and I added some color to this die cut using the My Favorite Things hybrid ink in Grout Grey. This adds a touch of color that is not really visible on camera and I think also in the pictures, but in real life makes quite a difference. I also created some stars for my sky, and for that I diluted some white acrylic paint with some water. I picked up the paint with a paintbrush and then I am basically tapping the paintbrush with my fingers so that it will release some paint and create some splatters that will look like stars. For an extra detail on my card front, I decided to create a very subtle pattern using some of the smaller dies in the CC Designs Haunted House stamp set. I arranged them on a small acrylic block and then I am stamping them all over my card front using My Favorite Things hybrid ink in Grout Grey. So I am basically creating my own pattern paper, and because this gray ink is so light, I will create some subtle detail that will not take away attention from the main elements on my card, but will add interest to it. At this point, everything was ready and I could go ahead and glue everything together. I started with the spooky fence, and for that I am using my Nouveau Deluxe adhesive. I am gluing that down to the bottom portion of my card front, and then with the same Nouveau Deluxe adhesive I will carefully coat the back of these cobwebs and I will glue them down to my card base. This job would be really easy if you had something like stick-it adhesive, but I don't, so I made it work this way. The Nouveau Deluxe adhesive has quite a fine tip applicator, so I was able to put down just a little bit of glue, and this way I didn't have glue oozing out and create a mess on my card front. I then adhered the little vampire and the mummy so that it looks as if they are chasing each other. I am using Nouveau Glue again, and this time, because there is a little bit of texture from that glitter embossing powder that I have on my spooky fence, I am using an acrylic block to hold those pieces down until the glue dries and they're nicely secured in place. I prepared a top folding A2 card base out of some white cardstock, and before adhering the sky to my panel, I need to adhere that to the card base. I am using the corners of my Misty to align the card base and the card front precisely. And I mentioned that in previous videos I picked up this trick from Katiziewski, and it's really a lifesaver. Off camera, I trimmed off the parts of those cobwebs that were hanging over the circular openings, so that I could inlay really precisely this circular sky die cut. I have already my double-sided tape peeking through, but for extra stability I added some Nouveau Glue as well. And I am using a heavy acrylic block to hold that piece down until the glue is dry. Using some more Nouveau Deluxe adhesive, I adhered the little witch flying there in front of the sky panel. And for my sentiment, I die cut some letters from some black cardstock using a die set by CC Designs. This is the Baggy and Tag metal dies, and I die cut the letters that form the word boo, and I glued them down to my card front using again some Nouveau Deluxe adhesive. For some finishing touches, I added white highlights using my Sakura White Jelly Roll pen. I also used my Spectrum Noir Clear Overlay pen to add shimmer to the purple areas of the witch's shoes and hat, as well as to the heart, and I apologize because that footage is somehow gone and I don't know how. But anyways, after that I coated those same areas as well as the sentiment with Ranger Glossy Accents to add some shine and dimension. And here you can see the sparkle and the dimension brought in by all the glitter and the glossy accents. And that's it for today. If you guys enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comments below, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. You can visit my blog for the full list of supplies, and I'll catch you guys soon with the next one. Ciao!